afternoon. We're here again at Blaenau Ffestiniog in Wales, having a look at another quarry. Today's quarry is Maenoffren, which is one of the oldest and highest quarries in this part of Wales. It was worked in history, started being worked again on a more industrial scale in the late 18th century, early 19th century, and then on and off until 1999 when the last underground section closed. But there is still a little bit of working here because when we have a look further up, you'll see a bit of Diphwys Quarry, which is next door. A lot of it is now a tourist attraction, but there is still some of it which is a working mine, and there is still occasionally some slate working goes on here at Maenoffren. So there's a lot to see. You can hear we're puffing up the hill. It's about 400 metres up above sea level, so it is very high up. But let's carry on puffing up the hill. Let's go.
So from the left hand side there, they'll load the slate in there, it'll crush it and it'll spit it out the top into these piles over there with the crushed slate. As you can see there, the conveyor belt there where the slate's going to go up, it's going to come back down, it's going to get rattled around in that bit there, and it'll chuck it off there into the wagon or into a pile depending on where they've angled it to. So as we look amongst the undergrowth down there, you can see rusted metal rails that run across there. That may have had a pipe looking at the brackets that ran through it, but that's actually part of the incline as it would head up the way. And also just behind us there's like an old building. I'm not really sure what that would have been. It's not actually part of what the incline would have been or part of the winding house. It may be just like an office or what sort of building. It's got a chimney, so it must have been something slightly important. So halfway up and we found, well, we think it's a bridge, but we're not sure what went underneath it or why it needed to be like that, but unless it was just sort of crossing maybe bits that dug out or blasted already, but it doesn't look particularly safe. I don't think we'll try and cross it, will we? No, we're not going to go and cross it.
From the mid-19th century, slate was shipped down via the Rhywbach tramway to the Ffestiniog railway below for onward transport. This narrow-gauge tramway served a number of other remote quarries including Rhywbach and Cutie Bagel. The tramway rose almost 300 metres through Maenoffren via 3 inclines. It was horse and gravity operated apart from the last few years of operation in the 1950s when a diesel locomotive took over. Number 2 incline was the last remaining working gravity incline in North Wales, and its winding house is still relatively complete, with sections of track also visible.
As we've reached one of the sort of plateau levels, this is the earlier quarry, Diffwys Casson quarry. You can still sort of see the chimney and some of the buildings in the distance. Obviously we're going to go and take a closer look at it shortly, but we're just heading towards it. And there are still things on a slightly higher upper level, but there's not too much. This is kind of about the level where most of the buildings are. But this is one of the earlier parts of it, and it still remains stood here. This could be a couple of 100 years old, I'd have thought. Let's go and take a closer look at some of these buildings. I think this also still has maybe its wheel or its drum in it, possibly. Some steps going up to it as well, so we'll go and take the steps up. There it is, see that there, the big lever. That'll be the brake which will push on the, you can see it there, the bit that sticks up, that'll push on the outside of there to slow it down and stop it. That's still sat there after all this time.
Diffwys Casson was the first quarry on this site of Blaenau Ffestiniog, and its 4 sections have been worked since the mid-18th century. A group of quarry managers commercialised it into the 19th century, and it ran up until 1890. At its peak, it produced over 5,000 tonnes of slate per year, which was processed in steam-powered integrated mills producing roof slates, the remains of which are well preserved. Following a couple of short periods of operation in the early 20th century, it closed for good in 1955.
So here on the plateau with the level of all the buildings for the mines, these are where the works would have happened, the finishing, the cutting, that kind of thing. This is basically like the factory for the mine, where they would have processed all the slate before they would have taken it down in wagons or whatever they did back then. So we're going to go and have a look and see if there's any bits of machinery or equipment left inside. There might be some little bits of railway tracks as well, because there's some on the floor. But yeah, let's enter. Go and have a look over here, some more of these machines. Right, I see. So that wasn't a bogie on the floor, it was actually a cutting wheel, because you see it's on an angle there. So as it rotates around, it will cut on the angle instead of putting a straight cut in it. Oh yeah, and if you look through the roof there, you can see how everything used to run on these big cogs through there. These probably would have had belts that would have come down. They would have driven other devices along there, so possibly like these over here would have been stationed in line with that. So as that comes down, that would have driven that, and it would have been driven from one central bit, which would have been all the way in through here possibly, because that looks like it carries on. Again, you see up there, there's the motor. There's one for each side. Looking at that, yeah, there's another one across there. So this would have driven this side. See that carries on all the way. Looks like there we've got like a cutting bed possibly. Not actually dated, sadly. Some of these things are, which is cool.
Maenoffren itself was originally known as the David Jones Quarry and was worked for Slate from around 1800. For the next 100 years, the quarry expanded down towards the town, incorporating some of the previously mined areas and including a number of underground tunnels. By 1861, it became a limited company known as Maenoffren and expanded further. At its peak, it employed over 400 people, producing 8,600 tonnes of slate a year.
The second half of the hall is very similar to the first. It's very similar equipment, but it's far better preserved on this side. This must be due to the weather and possibly also the preservation of the roof. Even the plastic is better preserved. Very similar to the other side, same kind of equipment. You can see the electrical power that was used here, so that's still present. May have been hydraulic before, but you can see here parts of a fluorescent light, and also would have powered the cutting machine behind it, and as I mentioned, it's in far better condition than the other side. We've also got the conveyor belt, which runs from one end of the workshop to the other. And this is still quite complete, still here as well. There are a number of machines along this side. This was a very large quarry and operated for around 200 years. So it's got a very large two-sided hall to process thousands of tons of slate. And again, you can see here some of the electrical equipment. This would have been retrofitted later on. It wouldn't have been original. Electricity was just coming in during the mine's lifetime. This is one of the later sheds. We saw Diffwys earlier, which is one of the earlier mines, and also below, but this is the main Maenoffren section. And on this side, not only do you have the complete machines still in place, but we also have the workbenches and the workstation that surrounds it, that would have helped with the noise. It would have been incredibly noisy in here with all of the machinery working. And we can see now the equipment for loading and unloading on this side, again still in place. Brilliant to see this. It's one of the few mines where you can see it to this extent, again because it's newer and has closed a lot later. Usually all of the material has gone and a lot of the metal work as well. But for this one, a lot of it's still in place because this was in operation up until the 1970s.
The main processing floor at Maenofferen was built in the late 19th century for sawing, splitting and dressing the slate. It's over 400 metres above sea level, with the mine tunnels reaching down from here. The buildings are now Grade 2 listed and plans are underway to ensure their preservation for future generations. Some sections are closed, such as the winding house leading to the largest underground tunnel. The mill was originally water-powered before being converted to electricity early in the 20th century.
It's pretty dark in here, but we found like the electrical building for the site. Size of the wires on this cable, that is massive. That runs into here, so see here we've got what would have been the generators, and we've got this big electrical panel which has a lot of stuff broken off it or stolen off it, I guess. That though, big huge switch. back out again into another building. This one's got a lot of the cutting machines in, or milling machines. Yeah. This would have possibly been something like a workshop where they would have built and fixed things from. Oh wow. All boxes and, oh, these are like bolts and stuff, look at all them. It's like a stores.
Maenoffren was bought by the neighbouring Diphwys Quarry in 1975 and was gradually wound down and closed. Underground production continued until 1999 as the last large-scale slate quarry in North Wales. Some small working continues here today with modern equipment, including processing leftover slate from the old quarry tips and untopping old shafts to see what lies beneath.
So that's us finished our walk around the quarry and the different levels of it, the old part of the quarry and the newer part of the quarry, and also having a look in the sort of factory part, buildings that were left standing with all the machinery there. We're now going to take ourselves a little sort of different detour to the way we came up. It takes us back sort of through the trees and then back to the car as we head back down to Blaenau Ffestiniog. Thanks for joining us on our little adventures. See you next time.
This lower section was the site of Votty and Bowydd Quarry, which operated separately from the late 18th century and merged in 1870. Despite there being little left to see on the ground, this was even larger than Maenoffren, with over 500 workers producing 17,000 tonnes of slate per year at its peak. There were two major changes with the turn of the 20th century: a large underground roof collapse, shortly followed by early electrification via a hydroelectric scheme nearby at Dolwen. It was sold in the 1930s and merged into Maenoffren.